Howdy, folks. This is Dr. Matt Grieshop, Director of the Grimm Family Center for Organic Production and Research at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, and you're joining us for Organic Chat. Hello, everybody. Matt Grieshop here. Welcome to another Organic Chat. Today, we're going to be chatting with Erica Rohr and Edgar Godoy. They both work for Bioworks, which is a very important producer of biological insecticides, fungicides, and other biological products used by both organic and conventional growers. And we're going to be talking a little bit about regulatory issues around the development and marketing of biologicals. Thank you both very much for coming. So maybe to begin with, Erica, can you tell me or tell our audience just a little bit about your background, sort of who you are, how you got here?
I am a regulatory manager for Bioworks. Before that, I had worked also in the bio-ag sector for about 10 years, a little over 10 years prior to that. And then, kind of, I think like a lot of us, I was, farm kid growing up. So, this is what I wanted to do with my degree.
Fantastic. And where'd you get your degree?
UC Davis, go Ags.
Yeah, and the funny thing is we just found out both of us are Davis High grads, just 1 year apart. I'm apparently just a little bit older than Erica.
Yeah.
And Edgar, how about yourself?
Yes, my name is Edgar Godoy. I've been with Bioworks for almost 5 years already. So I'm a biological solutions advisor. That's my role. And recently, actually in 2025, I'm in charge of what we call the specialty agriculture market, which is a group of crops produced outdoors that I'm gonna be trying to target, and position our biopesticides. So I am a pest control advisor prior to coming into Bioworks. So I worked in distribution of different ag inputs and pesticides for a Santa Maria distributor. And I worked for the most part in strawberries, vegetables. I did a little bit of grapes and cannabis.
Oh.
So I recently finished my my master's program in plant protection science here at Cal Poly.
Yep.
Congrats.
Yeah. And it was a great project that you did.
Thank you.
Yeah. So Edgar, I actually had the privilege of sitting on Edgar's committee, and
That's right.
he did some excellent work looking at integrating biological products into powdery mildew management and botrytis too.
We did both, but we only published powdery mildew for wine grapes. Yeah.
Yeah. So really great work and really important work to move us ahead in the biologicals world. So Erica, as a regulatory specialist, could you tell us a little bit about the process that, say, a new biological plant protectant goes through in terms of making its way to the market, specifically in California?
Yeah. So it's actually, there's two major steps to the regulatory process for anything that is a pest control product. It needs to be federally registered with the EPA, and then they also need to be registered at the state level. And California in particular has a much greater data need than any other state. So often that's why you'll see things that are only marketed in the 49 states or, have language saying, not for this use in California. And so that will come from either a slight delay. California wants to look at everything that EPA looked at, including all the safety data. And then unique to California in the 50 states is the need for efficacy and phyto data.
Right.
And so new packages, new products can take about 1,000 days. They're working on it, but we've had packages take about 1,000 days. And so those can trail the EPA registration quite significantly.
Yeah, and that's something I don't know if our listeners are aware of, but here in California, it is unique that our State Department of Pesticide Regulations requires efficacy data, which at one time the EPA did require, and at this point I believe the only product categories that are required are for medical and structural, the last time I read the regulations. So not agricultural products, but products directed at medical, like parasitology, or structural, like termites, basically.
Public health, yeah.
But yeah, the EPA does not require efficacy data. They do, of course, require a lot of safety data and data on the mechanism of action and other aspects of the product. But something that I think our growers really benefit from is that registrants actually have to show that, yeah, this product works. And that's honestly, I think, a good thing, but is complicated.
It is,
Yeah.
yeah. And particularly under California-like conditions.
Yeah, yeah.
So that can be a challenge to foreign registrants that have, acquired data
Mm-hmm.
in other latitudes.
So how do you go about getting that data for the specialty data you need for California?
So particularly the efficacy and phyto data.
Yeah,
So I'm gonna actually ask Edgar for a little bit more input here, because as the pencil pusher, I just get these finished reports. So I'm gonna have Edgar go into the details of these field trials.
Sure. So we have a very well organized system in the company, and there's a person. His position is field development manager,
Okay.
and he's the one kind of leading the different products that we need to test, and he assigns the products and the crops and the target pests to the different. It can be either a technical service manager, and in this case, in my role, I get involved as well. But it's a new thing that we've been doing, because for the most part, it has been a technical service manager. So honestly, the biological solutions advisors only use the data after it's finished and to position the products. But in this case, I am involved. So what we do, we go with different COIs, and those are center of influence, and we talk to them and explain what we're trying to get.
Okay.
In terms of the target pest and the product that we're going to be using or testing. And for labeling purposes, I understand that we need to have 3 different rates that need to be tested, and a treated control and a positive control with an industry standard.
Right.
And we go through private researchers, and sometimes we go through people like you.
Yep.
And UC Davis, Cal Poly. I don't think that we have done anything over there at Fresno, but UC
Okay.
Extension Services and Cal Poly has been our main, at least for California. But that's what we do. So we go private researchers and the government industry or institutions to
Right.
get that data.
Right.
And that information is the one that we present to regulatory for labeling purposes.
Yeah.
And not only that, we also use it for creating the marketing material and the information that we want to show growers. So it's kind of a 2-step process, I see, because in the beginning we only do it as a proof of concept, trying to determine whether the biopesticide is going to work. And the second thing is we go and do a good number of trials in different crops where we see fit, and then we can add that information to the label. That's the information that you see Erica already
Yeah.
processed, right?
And then I also get involved at the front of those, helping with some of the permitting. So some states, if you keep it under a certain acreage, under 10 acres, you can just do your testing at will for unregistered pesticides. But in California, all testing, except for university professor carve-outs, need a research authorization. So
Oh, that's right.
so we
Yep.
help get those permits. And then particularly with biologicals, we're often using live organisms. So we have to coordinate with USDA for the permits. And then that also, USDA works hand in hand with CDFA also to review those and make sure that the release is approved.
Okay. Is that APHIS through USDA that you're working with, or is
Yes.
it a different?
Yes,
I would
uh-huh.
assume that would be so that's the Animal Plant Health and Inspection Service.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that's really interesting. So, what do you think? So, obviously these regulatory processes have evolved over decades. They're not something new, and frankly, their initial development was done under a very different landscape of plant protectants. So, mostly synthetic plant protectants, whether it's a fungicide, rodenticide, insecticide, etc. What do you see as some? Do you think there are some differences or challenges that biologicals present that may not be fully sort of encompassed with the regulatory set that was developed for
sure.
a radically different sort of set of compounds with very different performance characteristics?
Oh, absolutely. So in addition, so there's kind of three types of testing that we do before we even get to the phyto and the efficacy testing. You've got the human health testing for worker protection safety, where the oral toxicity, things like that, contact toxicity. But we also do non-target testing. It's called ecotox testing, and then there's environmental fate. In particular, the ecotox testing, the non-target testing, is very challenging for the biopesticides because, as you mentioned, those test procedures were set up for chemicals, right? Where you can just dose the diet or whatever it is with, just this small amount of a pure chemical,
Right.
as opposed to the biopesticides where it's a full fermentate, the whole soup, the whole broth, or not just the organism and its metabolites, but also the substrate that it's grown in.
Right.
That's because a lot of these are also organic approved, and so that's one of the requirements of NOP is that it's not purified necessarily. It's it's the raw, the AI, the active ingredient is typically the whole, like I said, the microbe, its metabolites, and the original substrate it was grown on.
Okay.
So that's quite a bulky package.
Right.
And so to try to mix that into the test organism's diet, often it makes it so the test is any effects that you're seeing from repellency, right, where the insects would rather just starve than eat the diet, aren't necessarily because of any toxicity of the product itself. It's just you've taken the sugar solution, right, that the bees love, but then you've mixed it with something that they don't recognize.
Right. It's sludge.
And you've had to, in order to have the correct dosage, it's so, right, it's,
I can imagine sludge.
it's so sludgy that, maybe they don't want to eat it, or they don't, or, like the aquatic studies, right, you've got to put so much into the tank that it's not necessarily any metabolite or any, the microbe that is upsetting the fish, right? It's their gills are getting clogged up with substrate. So, so you can have these very artificial results of, or just inconclusive results because you're not able to complete the test.
So one thing that I definitely have noticed with biologicals is that the amount of active ingredient we use tends to be much higher. So, I mean, you look at something like a pyrethroid, and you're talking about just a minuscule amount of product that's going to a big spray tank, comparatively. So, does that contribute to that, do you feel? I mean, because we are typically spraying a more concentrate with biologicals, is that part of that problem? With just to get to the actual dose that you need to evaluate the test based on old standards, there's just a lot more of it.
Yeah, I mean, well, yeah. So there's the dose is sort of artificial in the eco test, right? Where it doesn't necessarily, it's so high to meet the the LD50 that it's not necessarily representative of what's actually going out on the crop and what's actually needing to go through the spray tank.
But that would compound that issue, right? So I mean, if you need to use 100 times more product for the actual application, and for your eco test, you've got to go say 1,000x or 10,000x the expected rate. Well, 10,000 times 100 is a lot more than 10,000 times 1.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's really interesting. I had never heard about that or thought about that. Thank you so much, Erica. So you mentioned organic. So what are some of the things that you have to go through to meet National Organic Program standards?
So there's a list of not just actives that are allowed, but also the coformulants, the inerts that are allowed, and specifically, so there's allowed synthetics and not allowed organic or natural products, like arsenic, right? It's natural, but nobody wants that on their food.
Yes, so is plutonium.
Yes. But there are also allowed synthetics for which there is no acceptable natural product. So we have to, so for the recipe, right, we have to adhere to those available products for us. And then moreover, there's sort of two criteria that they look at in the so that's the book audit, right? The process audit. They'll also come on site and look at your manufacturing, and there's sort of two like hurdles that you need to make sure that you're able to prove to them. One is the possibility of contamination and mix-up, not just with what you think of like filth or bugs or whatever, but also conventional products.
Right, yeah, if you've got multiple supply chains running or multiple processes running, you don't want the conventional side to get into the organic side. No different than if you have a split growing operation, right? You've got to maintain separation.
Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense.
And then also, and that kind of ties to it a little bit too, also fraud. So making sure that, so one thing they'll do is they'll look carefully through our inventories and our purchase records and make sure that for everything that, all the sales that we've claimed, that we've actually procured enough raw materials to make that, to show that we've made that.
Well, and that's very analogous to sort of the mass balance that's done as
Yeah,
part
it's exactly
of
a
the
mass
organic
balance.
inspections, where it's like, well, you said you sold, 100 tons of organic rice, but you've only got enough ground to grow 5.
Exactly.
What's going on?
Yes.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah.
And I just wanted to mention something in terms of the yearly registration in the OMRI certified. Before you notice that I got a call,
Yeah.
and that was a PCA asking for the new registration for organic for one of our products, Millstop. So that is a
That's
yearly.
right. It turned over at the
Yeah,
beginning of
because
June.
it was expired on June 1st.
Okay.
So he wanted to write a recommendation for an application just right now, and today is the 6th, right? So we needed to have it ready for him this next year. So that is a yearly renewal. I understand, right?
Yeah, so every year we have to renew the whole package. So this is, OMRI is very big in the U.S. There's other certifiers that like, EcoCert, Control Union, that are, in the U.S. but tend to be more for the ex-U.S. markets. Washington State also runs its own
That's right.
organic program. California as well has an organic input program. But I'll just sort of keep this to OMRI since that's national and common in the U.S. So for OMRI to maintain their certification, so USDA, right, like the green seal says USDA organic, right, that goes on things. That is awarded by USDA, but USDA can't hire all those inspectors, right? So like everything is contracted out to these certifiers, of which OMRI is a certifier for organic inputs, right? And then you've got other certifiers like CCOF that will certify the actual produce itself, the production of the produce itself.
Absolutely.
And but they'll still walk it back into the inputs and look at the OMRI certification. And so for us, as a crop input, when we go through organic certification, like I mentioned, there's sort of that desk audit where we go through our manufacturing process and our ingredients, and they look at that, and then they will do. There's a rule, I can't remember what it is. They have to do like 10% or 1% of all of their products need to be audited every year. And then also we get what's called an ongoing compliance. So about everything that we have certified, within 4 or 5 years, everything needs to go through that desk audit again.
Okay.
And then high nitrogen fertilizers have unannounced inspections, I think annually.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and then we've had some high profile. There was a organic fertilizer that it turned out they were spiking with. I can't remember the name of that one, but they were spiking with either nitrate or urea. And then of course I think it was Weed Slayer.
Yep.
Was the one that had conventional herbicides in it. It was
Glyphosate or something.
Yeah. I think it had glyphosate, and it might have had 2,4-D or something in it too. It was 2, I remember, but that was a pretty high profile
Fraud. Yeah.
fraud case, and I think really affected the way regulations are being run out. So I know this is a short conversation, but I would really love to ask you a question in terms of, so being where you both are at in the industry, and being so tightly involved in these processes, both the field side in terms of figuring out, okay, does it work, and then the regulatory side, how do we communicate that, and are we going to meet standards? What are a couple of challenges or opportunities that you see for sort of improving that process? Or another way to look at it, if you had a magic wand and you could just make something happen, or a couple of things happen, what would those things be?
Well, more reviewers, hiring more reviewers to get. I think that we have a good, robust program that ensures that that buyers are getting what they pay for, that they're getting what's on the label, that they're, especially in California, that they're getting a product that's efficacious and will work as advertised when used as directed. But it's such a long process. I think I mentioned that in California, a new AI can take 1,000 days.
Right.
And they've just implemented like a digital processing program
Oh, that's great.
in the home of the Silicon Valley, right? Like California remained the last holdout of paper-based submissions.
Continuing education units are the same way for PCA. It's
Yeah,
a paper process.
Yep, binders, 6 copies of the label. It was wild, and Sacramento's, an hour and a half away from San Jose. But,
it's slow to change.
but they finally, got CalPest, and so that's, a digital
Fantastic.
submission process. So we're able to actually go to the different stations in parallel instead of the literal binders going from station to station. So hopefully that will speed it up, but I mean, it's still quite a long process. And so just, wherever we can find these efficiencies, wherever we can, I know that's sort of the opposite, that's what's happening in the federal government right now, but wherever we can, have more scientists and more reviewers that can get these packages through more quickly. Business really thrives on consistency and like
Yes.
knowing what's happening. And so, being able to know that, we'll get a package out in X amount of time helps us to plan our launch, helps us to, understand what the ROI is going to be, and, actually, is it worth registering this project?
Yeah.
So that's what I would say. I think, if I could wave a magic wand, it would be that, what is it, the anti-Doge
Yeah.
to hire more science.
And this is industry saying they need more support for regulators. That's an interesting. That's kind of you see that a lot in the organic marketplace. It's an interesting marketplace because it's really based on regulation, I think, which is pretty fascinating. But it's really interesting to hear you say that, Erica. How about you? I mean, maybe like on the field side, on the evaluation side, is there something?
I've been kind of thinking about this, and I've been proposing the idea that, when we actually connect with the researchers that are going to be conducting these trials, and I recently had that conversation with somebody else, is that, the protocol that, we propose sometimes is complicated for the researcher because they're actually used to test chemistries.
Right.
So probably if something needs to be improved is the understanding from the researcher that, they're not dealing with the same compound, it's a different product in its different requirements than the regular chemistry. So helping on the evaluation of the product the way it is supposed to be deployed to the field, it's an improvement that I will actually I try to have a conversation with. Sometimes it becomes just more expensive, if we ask for more stuff. But honestly, that's something that I would like to see more, that the researchers are actually, if they are still evaluating chemistries, that's okay.
Right.
But if they evaluate these biological products, that they have a different approach or adjusted approach based on conditions that are needed. Because I was in that boat, doing my research and applying the biofungicides standalone. I knew that not a single grower was going to be doing that,
Right.
in real life. It was just a requirement to have it as standalone applications. We did like 12 applications of the same product, and sometimes, for the most part, it didn't work. But it was a requirement that, for publication or the research requirements were there. And at the end of the day, we found out, the integration, the program was the one, that actually made sense. So having that ability to switch between, okay, so what product I'm testing, so I test it right.
So it sounds almost like a paradigm shift that you're suggesting there, Edgar. And so the current paradigm, and this resonates with me, is we tend to test stuff standalone, right? And that's really built on sort of the background history of chemical pesticides, things that work at the as a molecule, and typically at a very low rate, right? And are scalable because they're petrochemical derived, yada yada yada. So we've developed this sort of culture of research, if you will, and culture of understanding of how these products work. That's very much sort of standalone. Okay, this does this. But the reality, I think I hear you saying, is that with the biologicals, there's a lot more, there's many more considerations to take into account. And really, ultimately, one of those is, how does this fit into an entire program? And that, it sounds like, is the piece that you think is perhaps missing, that we don't have enough research that's focusing on putting things together in programs, which obviously, to me at least, would seem like, yeah, that's the logical next step. Figure out how something, sort of like it's ceiling and floor, and then figure out, okay, how does this fit into what we're already doing? What are the considerations that might make it work better? Is that accurate?
Not only that, but the conditions that probably the crop are going to need,
Right.
for that product to actually perform best.
Absolutely.
Because if let's say that you put it into a conventional 100% conventional field, low. Let's say that we're testing a biological in the soil,
Okay.
and then that soil has been used for like the last 40 years conventionally,
Yeah.
where there is low organic matter, and then really depleted of resources that those biologicals need
Right.
to actually perform. So my thinking is that, well, the grower and the researcher need to be like in understanding that they need to do something better for those organisms to perform,
Absolutely.
and not grow the crop conventionally as they have
Right.
in the past, because maybe there are not enough resources for those organisms to do their job.
Right, right. Because
so-
it's not just a molecule. It's actually a living critter that it's like
Needs
little
conditions.
livestock, right?
Yeah, like when we were testing like in the clusters, managing the canopy was key.
So
because-
grape clusters, just for our
Grape
listeners,
clusters,
right,
yeah,
right.
I'm sorry.
So, no, it's okay.
Yeah, wine grape clusters. So if there was a time when they were de-leafing and there was no leaf protection, the sun was hitting on that cluster, from one side, and so if that organism was not protected at all, because it didn't have UV protection or anything like that.
Right.
So that practice maybe about de-leafing was not probably the best practice in my eyes, because you were not, providing the conditions for that organism to survive on the skin of the grape. But those things are like not only the protocol, the methodology itself, but the way the growing conditions, for those organisms to do their job again.
Right. No, that's fascinating. So yeah, it's a kind of a contextual problem, right? It's not just, it's under what context will this succeed, under what context will it not succeed, and if you know that, then it allows you to use the tool properly.
Correct.
Well, like the old adage, right? If all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And as I like to tell my students when they're having problems sometimes, like, well, maybe we're using the wrong tool. You can drive drywall screws with a hammer. I may have actually done that before.
Yeah.
It's painful, and the result is maybe a little not what you would want. And but understanding that context of what's going to fit the system, how it fits together, just becomes more important. That's really exciting. So, do you have any parting comments or other things you'd like to discuss? This has been a really fascinating conversation.
I think one of the things that we touched on before the podcast when we were just visiting, I think is something that's really important for people, especially in the organic community, to try to remember is that food is a right, food security is a right, but it's people that grow the food for us.
Absolutely.
So not just the family farmers, but also the farm workers
Right.
working for them. And so making sure that those farm workers have safe products to work with that isn't going to endanger their health, and then the business owners themselves are actually able to make a living and put food on their own tables.
Right.
And so making sure that that we understand that while food is a right, it isn't free, and so
Right.
making sure that we're able to sustain. Not just the communities, the food
Right.
security of the communities, but also the economic security of those people that provide it for us.
That's interesting, Erica. I mean, it strikes me that with rights come responsibilities, right? That was kind of redundant, but yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a
Spider-Man or
so
something.
access to food is a right, but you have a responsibility everyone has a responsibility towards ensuring that that right exists.
Mhm.
That sounds, that's incredibly logical, I think. Yeah. So, any other last things you'd like folks to know, or?
Well, in general, I would like to say that we're always looking for from the regulatory standpoint and from the efficacy standpoint, bringing products and solutions to growers that are proven, and that can be hopefully integrated in their systems. I know that there is a little bit of complication sometimes, because growers like simplicity. They wanna keep doing stuff, that way they did it with chemistries, but to incorporate these technologies, they need to be open to change, and it will actually make their systems a little more complicated sometimes, but at the same time, they're gonna have efficacy on those products for them
Right.
to work on their target pest or diseases. And sometimes we're able to actually do it without many changes, but that's when it becomes a little bit more problematic, because we're using them the way they're not supposed to be used.
Right. Right. That makes very good sense. Well, thank you both for participating in this edition of Organic Chat. It's been a real pleasure. We've been talking with Erica Rohr and Edgar Godoy, both with Bioworks, and just talking a little about the biopesticide marketplace regulations and sort of the future a bit, I think. And it's been absolutely wonderful having you on the show.
Thank you, Matt.
Thanks
Appreciate
for
that
having us.
for the opportunity.
Great to see you.
Thanks for listening to Organic Chat. This podcast is recorded on the Cal Poly campus. Production provided by our production engineer, Mary Nascimento.